All this talk about transformation, we're going to kind of transfer to a transformation roundtable here in a second, but I just want to talk a little bit about the impetus for this roundtable. I was speaking with the Iowa Food Bank Association, and they told me this amazing story about the scale up during COVID, basically from 30 million meals to 60 million meals, which is, that's not a walk in the park. On top of that, and I'm sure they're going to say this later, but on top of that, they really had hard time with their volunteer network as well because of the pandemic. And so that really pushed us to think about what can we learn about transformations. And it's not just about COVID, but it's about the derecho in our state, or hurricanes, or other acute disasters. And then we want to use those things that we learn to really attack the root causes of hunger. Because we're great in an acute situation, because we can meet the moment. But we really have to deal with the acute causes. We really have to deal with the societal causes of hunger. And that really sometimes doesn't have to do with the food system or food policy, but it has to do with so many other social policies. And so I'd like to kick off our roundtable discussion and introduce our moderator, the founder and chief director, nope, I didn't say that title right, I'm sorry, Aubrey, the founder of the Greater Iowa Eat Forum here in Des Moines. The Greater Des Moines Eat Forum here in Iowa.
I know, really cool.
tongue-tied. I apologize, Aubrey, for that. But Aubrey is going to take our other 8 panelists through an excellent roundtable. Over to you, Aubrey. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks, Kyle. Yes, I'm Aubrey Alvarez, Executive Director with Eat Greater Des Moines, and I'm really excited to be a part of this discussion today regarding transformations within the food system. So I have had the opportunity to know some of these amazing women outside of this panel, and have worked with them before, and a couple of them are new to me, and I was blown away with some of the amazing work that they're doing. So we'll kick things off and kind of go through 3 major themes, but really want this to be kind of an opportunity for a conversation, so we can see definitely some tried and true kind of people who have been in this food system space and food security space for a long time. And then we also have the privilege of reading and hearing about some organizations and groups that are really have gotten started recently and are making a really impactful difference within our community. So to start off with introductions, we're just going to go around the screen, and I will start. Alexandra, could you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Aubrey. Yes, I'm so excited to be a part of this panel. My name's Alexandra Baumann. I'm the Nutrition and Wellness Director at the Iowa Department on Aging.
Thanks. How about Linda?
Hi. I'm Linda Gorko. I'm excited to be on this panel also, and thank World Food Prize. I'm with I'm the executive director of the Iowa Food Bank Association, and we work with the food banks across the state: Northeast Iowa Food Bank, Riverbend Food Bank, Food Bank of Iowa, Haycap Food Reservoir, Food Bank for the Heartland, and Food Bank Siouxland, and work with all of our partners across the state of Iowa to help ensure that sufficient food is accessible to all.
Great. How about Faith?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Faith Sandberg Rodriguez, and I serve as Senior Advisor at the Iowa Department of Human Services.
Thank you. Christina.
Hi, everyone. It's great to join everyone. So I am the Meskwaki Food Sovereignty Coordinator for the Sac and Fox Tribe of the Mississippi and Iowa. And our mission is basically to secure food sovereignty by seeding, growing, and harvesting Meskwaki indigenous knowledge and lifeways. So happy to be here, see a lot of familiar faces, and I look forward to our discussion.
Great, me too. All right. How about Monica?
Good morning. My name is Monica Ovcharsky. I'm here representing the Supply Hive. I'm on their board of directors and serve in a lot of capacities there. And I'm also the owner operator of Sweet Tooth Farm, which is an urban farm in the Riverbend neighborhood of Des Moines. And I also started the first community fridge in the state of Iowa that has been operating with the support of some of the folks on this call since December of 2020.
Thank you. Yes, I actually was telling Monica I just got a text message about some food that needed to go to her fridge right as we were preparing for this panel. So excited to have you here. All right, Zuli.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Suli Garcia. I'm the founding president of Knock and Drop Iowa. We are a culturally specific Latino food pantry, and we started in March of 2020 during the pandemic because it was highly necessary for our community to have a safe space where they can go for culturally specific food. Thank you all.
Great. And finally, Kim.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kim Guardado, and I am the director of the HACEP Food Reservoir here at HACEP. HACEP is a Hawkeye Area Community Action Program. We're a community action agency in East Central Iowa. I have been with the agency for 19 years, and I worked in various capacities here, and I'm excited to be leading the food reservoir and working with you all this morning.
Great. Well, thank you. So, really to kick things off, we want to talk about, I think everyone can recognize that if the key word over the last year and a half has been pivot and adapt. And we've all been in situations where we have really had to rethink how we are doing our work and why, and are there other ways we can get things done and meet our goals? So, really given the increasing demands that we've seen across our community, but also across the country, can you share a little bit about how your organization may have changed, experimented, or tried some new things over the last year? And I'm going to send this first question over to Linda and Faith, if you want to get us started.
Sure. When you talk about pivot, it is an overused word this past year, but the food banks and pantries that serve Iowa did pivot in the wake of the pandemic. There are several key items that happened immediately. The lack of volunteers impacted the food banks and the pantries. The food supply chain disruption impacted all of us, and it was imperative for us to collaborate and work to ensure food safety and meet the increased demand during the pandemic. And things evolved throughout this past couple of years, but we worked with our partners to increase distribution to the counties that we serve. And just to give you an idea, in 2019, we distributed 30 million meals across the state of Iowa, and in 2020, it was 50 million meals. So it gives you an idea of the transformation that took place this past year. And it happened by pulling together and working together. We created many supply chains for basic products, and we were able to utilize local protein, which was through the Pass the Pork, Beef Up Iowa, and Turkey to Table programs to ensure that healthy proteins were delivered to our pantries and Iowans in need of food. So there was a variety of items that did occur in addition to working with the National Guard. But we created some partnerships that I think will be beneficial for years to come, and we learned a lot. And at the capacity that we're at, we continue to serve Iowans in a variety of different ways. So,
great. Faith, can you talk about, given your role and kind of perspective, being with the Department of Public Health and Department of Human Services, what were some of those changes, transformations, adaptions that you saw from your angle?
Sure. Thank you, Aubrey. So I think the biggest thing that we experienced is really most of our services, particularly when we think about the SNAP program and then the WIC program over at Department of Public Health, those are typically delivered in person, right? We have folks coming into our eligibility offices to furnish their application and their materials to get a decision. We have folks going into WIC clinics because that's the way that the model works. And so the biggest adaptation was really how do we have the same service levels, but also ensure that we're protecting those we serve as well as our staff. So really having to rethink how we engage with our clients and ensure that they continue to receive the services and benefits that they need. In addition to that, we were able to take advantage of some very useful waivers from our federal partners to facilitate that, including an ability to move to electronic signatures. You know, you would think in 2020, 2021 that we would have that in full force. That would be the standard, but it's not. And so really adapting our model, pivoting over to being able to do something like that. And then, you know, really when the derecho hit, that just added another layer entirely. And so we were able to launch our disaster SNAP program, which is for people who don't normally qualify for SNAP, but due to losses during a disaster, such as the derecho, their income does qualify them when you factor in those losses. So we deployed to Lynn County first, and it was really a pilot because no other state had ever operated a disaster SNAP program in the middle of a pandemic. So we piloted it for the entire nation, and there were bumps in the road. There always are. But it was an amazing opportunity for Iowa to show that we have the ability to make those adjustments and to continue that level of service and continue meeting people where they're at to ensure that they do receive the services that they need. And that's something we're really proud of. And then to just, you know, briefly build on what Linda said with the Feeding Iowans Task Force, that really created and improved some partnerships where we either didn't have them or already did have them. And that's work that we're continuing to carry forward today. And that is really exciting for us to have such a wide variety of partners at the table that we are working with in this continuous improvement.
Great. Well, and you talk about, you know, some of these lessons learned and the opportunity to try things and hopefully keep them going. You know, I think that's also the part is if there's been things that worked, even during the pandemic or for a disaster specific, you know, derecho, that we can continue with some of those. So Alex, can you talk about, you know, how some of the Iowa Department of A&G has been, you know, thinking about making some changes, you know, over the last few years, and really the pandemic was kind of an opportunity to really just jump in and do it.
Yes, definitely. So the Iowa Department on Aging administers the Older Americans Act, which is a program for older adults age 60 plus, all Iowans. So we provide a wide variety of nutrition services, congregate meals, home delivered meals, and then we also provide nutrition education, nutrition counseling with a registered dietitian, and health and wellness evidence-based programs for falls prevention. So really trying to meet the health of the whole person. So what we've found these last even 5-10 years is we have the baby boomers who are now coming into they're about 56 to 76 years old. And that baby boomer population is much different than what we've worked with for the past 40 years. Our congregate meal sites have been around since the 70s, and the model hadn't really changed that much. A lot of them were working in senior centers, community buildings, churches, and you'd be able to go to a site at 11:30 or 12, have your one meal choice and your food tray, and that's your meal. And that worked for a while, but obviously with COVID-19, those meal sites had to close. And what we're finding with our new older adult population, first of all, we have more older adults than we've ever had before. They're living longer, they're working longer, there's greater rates of food insecurity, and they're also more diverse. So even though that we have a larger population to work with, we found that our congregate nutrition participation had declined about 45% between 2010 to 2018. And this is kind of a nationwide trend, but much larger in Iowa. So when we took a deeper dive a couple of years ago about why, we found that our model wasn't really meeting the needs. Older adults weren't attracted to go to these sites at 11:30. They're working longer. They're taking care of their grandchildren. They're not wanting the meal options that other older adults are wanting. So in looking at some of these models, we've tried a couple different things, and COVID really just kind of brought this innovation work into hyperdrive. Back in 2017, the Heritage Area Agency on Aging launched something called the Encore Cafe in Lynn County. It's different than that traditional congregate meal site where it's a pop-up site in local beautiful community buildings, and working with a caterer. They worked with Hy-Vee to provide meal options. So they had a full salad bar, 2 hot meal options. It was open for about an hour over lunchtime, and it was a pop-up in different community sites. So what started for about 35 participants in Lynn County a year, Heritage then saw an increase by the end of 2 years of about 1,300 people going to the Encore Cafe. So when COVID-19 came, we've been wanting to expand this kind of innovative pilot statewide. We talked with our area agencies on aging, and we worked with Elderbridge Area Agency on Aging in Northwest Iowa to develop something called the Iowa Cafe model, which is a restaurant partnership. So we know local restaurants were struggling due to the pandemic, and they could provide attractive meal options with a lot of choices to older adults at different times of day, weekends, evenings, breakfast, whatever that might look like. So they started the Iowa Cafe model, and older adults receive a credit card style card. They go into the local restaurant that's agreed to host an Iowa Cafe site, and they can swipe their card and receive a meal. And it's really some of that stigma around congregate meal sites changed because it's you get that credit card just like any other person would, and they can come with their friends and families over dinner and breakfast. So we're really excited about that model, and it's now that it's shown successful, we have about almost 20 sites statewide, and all of our area agencies on aging across the state are taking part in working with local restaurants. So we're really looking to grow that, and we're really excited about some of the feedback that we're hearing with that innovative model.
Thank you. Well, and I think, you bring up a great point about, how we do some of this work differently. But you also, I think something that stands out to me is just how we talk about the work, calling congregate meal sites, or, even words like food deserts. That's something that we're kind of moving away from, because, knowing that food deserts, those are something that occur, or deserts occur naturally, but food deserts didn't occur naturally. They were built. So, I think another term that I'm hearing more about, and Christina talked a little bit about, is food sovereignty. And, looking at the work, Christina, that you've been doing, can you talk about just, how you got started and some of the transformations that you've seen where you're at over, the last, not only year or two, but, the last few years?
Oh, yeah. I'm really excited that we are able to lead our community here on the Meskwaki Indian Settlement and the food sovereignty direction. The food sovereignty direction actually started more than 10 years ago. I was in my late 20s, and I wanted this organic farm for the community. So that way we had an opportunity to be able to provide healthier options within our community. So that way, perhaps we're happier, living a more fulfilled life and just a healthier lifestyle altogether. So a few years later, I became the executive director, and I still wanted that organic farm. And through those efforts and, partnering, communication, and discussions, we did get our tribal organic farm here on Meskwaki Indian Settlement. And it has a branch of Meskwaki Food Sovereignty, which is more about education and teaching our traditional and non-traditional foods. So in a way, it strengthens our cultural knowledge here, but it took a lot of time and effort, and it took so many people to work with. I can remember when we first brought on our economic development director at the time, and Larry Lastly Sr., his charge was, to get the organic farm going. and being able to recruit a fantastic person to lead the way to organize and court the food farm and the Meskwaki Food Initiative, which is Jennifer Vasquez. And we had several more later on. It's just amazing to see how, you have the right people at the right time, and, you could do community transformations, really. So we had we had Jennifer, we had Shally Buffalo, we had Emma Opolka, Mary Augustine, and several other AmeriCorps Vistas that came into our community and really helped our nation move forward in food sovereignty. There is so many different, I want to say, projects that we have here. We have, like food prep with our traditional foods like canning. More recently, though, it was interesting when the derecho happened in Iowa, and we had to turn around and somehow provide more food in the community and be less dependent on handouts or processed foods. So what we had done in turn, it was a project in the making, was providing more tilling services at the homes. And this provided not only strengthening our knowledge within gardening, but it also provided a healthier access to growing food here. So it's interesting how what we are doing here at Meskwaki Food Sovereignty and how we are able to exercise our sovereignty with it as a nation to provide food as a people to our community here. And I believe this is a good model that we could replicate across Iowa, across the nation, across the world, really. How a community can provide food for the people here, the knowledge behind it, and why it is so important to care about the different issues related to land, related to water, related to the air quality, all of that. So that way you become more independent and less dependent on handouts or giveaways or anything. Because I'm grateful services are available for those that aren't able, and we need those services for those that are not able to provide, food for their own families and everything. So there's so much we have done in the community here. The Meskwaki Food Sovereignty Facebook page is up, and you'll see you can track our progress, what we're doing, what we have done in the past. It's really beautiful to see how the community has come together and support this effort within our Meskwaki Indian settlement. It's almost as, when the derecho happened, we were out of electricity for a couple of weeks, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. And we were like, wondering, when is it going to happen? What's the preparation behind it? To be able for food. A lot of us were grilling out. But what was really beautiful was to see the community, not only Meskwaki in the settlement, but Tama and Toledo, over here come together and really clean up our environment, really pull together. We had a number of volunteers that had, manned the places where they're giving out food for lunches, because it was really hard to access food at that time. So I think with Meskwaki Food Sovereignty, it all starts with being more independent and growing our own food and growing our knowledge in life ways, as well as growing our people, growing our nation. So
that's amazing. Yes. If you haven't checked out or liked the Meskwaki Food Sovereignty Facebook page, you definitely should. There's just a ton of amazing content, and it's really neat to see how you're not only growing food, but also really reinforcing, the traditions that come from your culture. And that's great to see. And, it is something, when we talked initially, I think, the initial impression was, because of our, location and land, we're able to, really do more with this food sovereignty. And I think, Monica is a great example of, what trying to build community while growing food and growing neighborhoods is really something that she's also really been focused on. Can you, Monica, kind of talk about, what got you going into some of this, and what have you seen as you've been trying to grow, food, community, and all that goes along with it?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, a lot of things are true at the same time. I think that certainly when things started shutting down in 2020, it exacerbated people's food insecurity. But simultaneously, people have been struggling to get food access for a long time before the pandemic. So I think, everyone on this panel understands that a lot of these problems aren't new. They have been exacerbated and highlighted in the last year or two. So I've been running my farm since 2016. And I think one thing that was really apparent and evident in my smaller setting, very focused on the neighborhood that I live in and the community organizations that operate in my neighborhood, there was a lot of people who were kind of falling through the cracks, right? They couldn't access some of these services due to the time of day things were operating, or their work schedules, or their kids' schedules, or they just didn't qualify for certain services. And it really focused us on finding a way to have that accessibility without having too many restrictions and or timelines, right? So we started the community fridge along with your help, Aubrey, and Zuli as well from Knock and Drop, Iowa, because so many people and parents and neighbors were really, really struggling. And so I think in terms of like a model and a replicated model of putting up a community fridge or operating some type of neighborhood pantry that is not a large scale organization, I think it's very dependent on the neighborhood, on the people who live there, on their culturally specific food items, what they like to eat, and the geography of the neighborhood. We had some bumps in the road too. The refrigerator froze a few times in our Iowa winter. We had to figure that out and build something better. We had to figure out a model where we could have constant temperature and humidity tracking that would notify us if temperatures ever dipped or exceeded the safe levels. And so I think what we've really learned is that the community has to come first, and their specific needs and wants have to be the foundation before something like a community fridge is started, right? And we're so grateful and excited that now in 2021, there will be 4 community fridges operating in Des Moines. And we've been working with not Parks and Rec, the city of Des Moines zoning to figure out how to make this a long-standing program that can operate to kind of catch people who are in between, who are maybe not quite qualifying for some programs or not able to pick up at certain sites. So we're really excited about the community that we have built around these ideas of real kind of radical accessibility, and what that means, that there are actually no limitations, and you, the recipient, gets to decide how much is right for you, when the time is right to pick up, and what you want to take. And so we're still learning and growing, but we're definitely really proud of the work that we've done and all of the people who we've empowered to feel partnership and to feel ownership over this resource. It's a very bottom-up way of organizing. And so I think many community members have gotten the opportunity to be true partners and to feel a sense of pride and ownership over this resource.
Great. Well, and I want to make sure, so, when you think of communities and people jumping in to make sure that their, neighbors and community needs are met, Zuli, obviously you come very top of mind because that's exactly what you did when the pandemic really hit. Can you talk about kind of where that got started and really how your work has kind of transformed from leaving food on people's front steps to where you're at now?
Thank you, Aubrey. So yes, we started, as I stated, March 24th of 2020. I'm used to doing just projects for our Latino community when anyone is in need. And I figured, the pandemic hit and it was going to be a project. I figured 90 days. If you would have told me last year that I was going to have an organization, a nonprofit, I would have said no. And here I am today, and I'm very thankful that I've been able to help my community. And the reason why Knock and Drop started was because I started calling food pantries around and asking what documentation was necessary to receive food. And I was really saddened to hear some of the food pantries saying, well, if they don't have a government issue identification, they will not be able to receive food. And so I clarified and I said, when you're saying a government issue identification, will you accept a passport that is issued at an embassy in the United States or a Mexican consulate or a Salvadorian ID? I don't know. I'm asking. And their answer was no. Has to be an Iowa identification or driver's license. I'm sorry to tell you, but that hit me hard. I could not believe that we live in the United States and our community cannot receive food because we don't have the legal documentation. So that's when I said, okay, well, let's step up our game. And you know what? We need this. And I started contacting restaurants that were shutting down, and our restaurants, our families and friends were reaching out to me and saying, hey, we've got food. Let's go ahead and give it to you and share it with our community. So I have a commercial lot where I would just sit in my vehicle and make a live and say, we've got food, come get it. You don't need anything. And so that's how I started at the beginning. And then thankfully, Aubrey, I really do appreciate Eat Greater Des Moines. She emailed me and said, I love what you're doing and I want to support you. And that's when the USDA boxes came. And that was huge. We were able to get the USDA boxes. We were able to get milk to our community. It was huge. Now, we've become partners with others as Food Bank of Iowa as well. We have our own space and, but sometimes it's pretty hard because when you pay for a space that's $1,800 a month and you're having to feed a community and you're serving by the end of 2020, 10,000 families, where would these 10,000 families have gone if we would not have stepped up our game to help our community? And so that's where we were born. We said, let's do a project where it's going to be called Knock and Drop. I want people to feel comfortable that they're not going to get sick and we're going to protect them and we're going to protect the community as well. So we would go knock on the door. People would register with us and we would go knock on their door and they would know that we were dropping off food and they would just come out, pick it up and we would leave. We would step back. We had so many families. We had single mothers, single parents, single fathers that would literally cry and say, I don't have any food on my table. I don't have any more food in my refrigerator. And I didn't know what I was going to do if it wouldn't have been for your team. So I just ask all of you to kind of consider anytime we're doing any changes, we need to do positive changes to help the community that we all live in, to be able to help everyone that lives here, especially our kids, because I truly believe that a child should not go to bed on an empty stomach. So that's how we started, and we're doing other things. And again, I just want to thank Aubrey because she's been amazing to us.
Well, that's a nice way to, answer questions. You're all welcome to just, answer like Zilly if you want. Just kidding. But I think, again, you bring up, when it happened and learning more about kind of the state of food access and how, people can, or, some assumptions made too about how easy it is for people to access food, I think is really, the pandemic and also the derecho were a great example of, some of these systems that we, thought were holding everything up were really put in a tough spot. So, Kim, I know you had mentioned you were really proud of some of the transitions and transformations when you went through the derecho in the middle of a pandemic. Can you kind of talk through, what were some of those transitions or transformations and how has it impacted your work still?
I think as all the panelists have discussed, we all needed to pivot when we first started with the pandemic. And so, as a food bank, we needed to do everything we do in a different way. And I love how Zuli described the knock and drop. Knock and drop. And so I think, we moved to a lot of drive-through pantries and food banks across the state. We're doing that as well as pantries in lots of communities. So when the derecho hit, it was like, okay, now what? We need to do something in addition to what was already happening. Nobody had power. And there were lots of challenges. I think one of the themes that I've seen kind of across this panel so far has been the concept of working together. And I think we all know none of us can do this by ourselves. And so working with our partners is really how we're going to end hunger and how we're going to continue to work to feed people. And so when the pandemic first hit, we had our own challenges within our power and our food bank, and that's a whole nother story. But we were able to save all of our food, and we just loaded food up in a van and went out to different communities. And so I think, when we talk about identification or who needed food, we didn't ask any of those things. We knew people needed food. It didn't matter who you were. People were outside operating their chainsaws, and we would just share our food with them. And that kind of set up a pattern for us to work with the city of Cedar Rapids, Marion, Hiawatha in our surrounding area, and set up what they called just kind of food hubs and our stations across the city. And so every day we would deliver food to those stations multiple times throughout the day, and just continue to have food available. And of course, donations kind of were coming in from all over the place. But we worked really hard with all of our community partners, emergency management, all of those folks to be able to have food available. So I think the biggest takeaway that we had from that particular situation is the strength of the relationships we have with those partnerships. And because we had those partnerships already built, they were friendships, they were collaborations in the community, we were able to lean on those collaborations and partnerships to be able to just get food out to people immediately. And so, sometimes I think each one of us maybe a little bit thinks, hey, this is my piece of this and I can solve this. But when we all come together and work together to solve hunger or respond to a situation, that's when we can make a greater impact. So that's kind of really my takeaway is communicate and have those relationships set up ahead of time so that when that disaster hits, you know who you're going to contact, who you're going to work with, and how you're going to work together to get food to people. So many things kind of grow organically when there is times of disaster. But really what was best for us was to have those partnerships already developed.
Yes, I think that's great, and kind of leads us into, the next kind of part we wanted to talk about our partnerships. And like you said, really none of this can do any of this by ourselves. No one entity or organization or group is going to solve hunger and do it the same way. So, I know kind of thinking through some of these partnerships that arose through the last year, can you talk about, and I'll open this up. I've been trying to make sure I'm spreading questions around, but it's stressing me out. So I want to just open this up to, whoever would like to just share, what have been some, really critical partnerships that you've been able to develop that continue today?
Well, okay. Well, like you said, I agree that there's not one way that is going to solve. We have to work together, and there's a variety of programs together. When you talk about things that prohibit people to get food, that's very saddening. I would say that not all food banks or pantries are the same, so that I really encourage you to reach out. I'm glad that you did in your community, but that's how things are changed, is by discussing the needs and talking about it, and it's through that community partnerships. And I would say not only the community, but also we always are with the Iowa Food Bank Association taking a look at a federal level of what other things in other communities are doing, and so that we can share that with the programs that we do. So it's a variety of not only out, but around, and how we can develop that. So now we have disaster plans being created. So I just wanted to share a little bit on that.
That's a great point. I think because the food banking model has been around for quite a while. And, the food pantry and like Alexandra, like you said, the congregate meal sites have been a pretty long-term solution to how we've been trying to support those with food insecurity. Kim or Faith or Linda, have you seen your organization start to support some more of these maybe non-traditional projects like community refrigerators or, operations like Zuli's that weren't necessarily a pantry up front, but really are meeting the needs of the community? So how are you expanding? Who are your partners, and, what does their operation look like?
I can take that one. I think I know when, especially after the derecho, we had a couple of folks who really stepped up in our community through the Derecho Resource Center, or Bridge Under the Bridge might be a few names that you've heard about, that were just feeding people, getting food to people. And we were able to reach out to them and say, hey, do you know this resource of the food bank is available? And I actually heard a new term yesterday that it's a word that I've really been thinking about a lot in the last 24 hours, and it's the term disruptor. So I think, Aubrey, you said it correct in that we have this food bank network that is amazing, and we do absolutely phenomenal work in every county and every state in the nation. But we also know that there are other people that are doing great work, and that's why it's so critical that we work together. It's sometimes the disruptors that maybe change the system or force us to look at things a little bit differently so that we can think outside the box or think in a new way. And so, we have these couple organizations in Cedar Rapids, and we were able to say, hey, you guys are doing great work. And, we don't want to cook food and give food away under a bridge. So we want to support you to be able to do that. So how can we be partners and make that happen? And it's so critical to the work, because we need people to think outside the box, and we need people to do things in a new way. The food bank system is wonderful, and it absolutely works and feeds people. And we need everyone else too.
I agree. I love that. Oh, go ahead, Zuli.
Yeah. So I think that every once in a while, it's kind of nice to be a rebel. I am a straightforward person, but every now and then I've learned through the last year and a half that I had to be a rebel. I had to continue knocking on those doors. Doors were shut in my face, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to continue knocking them. My partners now are not just Eat Greater Des Moines, but also Food Bank of Iowa, the local Latinos, the local food truck vendors. I mean, we have amazing people out there that are willing to help you. We just need to go out there and knock on doors and just keep on saying, we need your help. But then the things that we have in place, like you said, 40 some years, 100 some years that things have been in place, we also need to change them, because we need to know that the community is changing. It's a huge change from 25 years ago. I was in a culture shock. I came from the state of California, where I heard several languages, several, people in different colors, and nothing was a maze to me. When I came here to Iowa 25 years ago, I was in a culture shock, because all I saw was Caucasian, and I didn't know where I was at. Did I come to Alaska? Where did I go? I don't know. So, as 25 years have passed by, I think Iowa has changed and has made some changes, but we need bigger and huger changes. And the only way we can make them is if we all sit down and we listen to each other, because that's the only way we're going to know what my community needs, what your community needs, and how we can come together to make the changes.
Zuli, I agree totally. And I would have to say, throw this in, Aubrey, is that, when I think of a food bank, back in the day, it was shelf stable only. And now the amount of produce, they've evolved, and this transformation that is happening with the food banks, we're not, 100%, but we're getting there. And the transformational amount of food that is healthy, that we want that nutrition, we need partners to share the use of SNAP, the wonderful additional, programs that are going on. I think that's what makes us a better Iowa. So kudos to everybody's work.
I do agree with you. Really quick, sorry, I do agree with you that is amazing, because I asked one of my volunteer kids, do you eat, for example, box mashed potatoes? And he looked at me and he said, no. And we had someone interviewing us. And I said, well, what do you eat? And he says, I eat beans, huevos, jalapenos, tomatoes, tortillas. So that is something that we all need to think about outside our box, like you just said, because back in the day, it was all this shelter, canned food, this, but we need to evolve and make changes.
Yeah. And I think growing food from farmers and getting that type of food is so important, and reducing the landfill, the amount that go into the landfill, and rescuing food is so important, and food safety, all the things that are in place, I think are the keys. And I think the basis for all of our work. So I think that's only way we can jump from there. I think it's fantastic.
I think it's really important too. Oh, sorry, Aubrey, but just kind of gonna go on what Zuli said, but it's just sometimes in order for something to start, you just have to do it. You just have to start. And I like the word rebel, but I just think sometimes you just have to follow your gut. And I think Zuli and I both did that last year. We saw this huge gap and this huge hole in our own communities, and listened to our communities and tried to do our best to fill it, even though there was no roadmap. There weren't, in the beginning, I think probably both Zuli and I, our biggest partner was Eat Greater Des Moines, who was just willing to listen to our ideas and say, well, okay, yes, I know this has not been done here before. And I know no one's doing it, but we want people to get food. And so we're going to support you monetarily and, with food. And so I think it's just so important for larger organizations and nonprofits to be willing to support non-traditional models and put some actual skin in the game, put some resources and money behind more non-traditional grassroots and community-based systems that are developing.
So one thing I wanted to mention, going off of what you said, Monica, with working with grassroots organizations, I think what we saw at partnerships has been the only way that we could work this past year. Like others have said, it's not like SNAP can provide 100% of the needs. Congregate Meals, home delivered meals, delivers maybe 5 meals a week. That can't provide 100% of the needs. So working with those partners, we were lucky to have some emergency funding that we worked with Iowa Food Bank Association to provide additional funds to them for older adults. If a home delivered meal route is going to a home and delivering a meal, why not combine that with a box of food items together? We also worked with Central Iowa Shelter and Services. They were working on a small pilot with local food trucks in the communities. They were providing meals with the local food trucks. So we worked with them to provide meals specifically for older adults. They drove out to parks close to senior high rises so that those older adults could go with their families to those areas. Now, some of those are on pilot-based programs, but what we can see is if there's successful models like that, then we can show the results, we can gather some research and present it to try to get the additional funding to make that long-term.
That's, and I think those are exactly the kind of ideas and partnerships that, I think for Alexandria kind of mentioned that some of that work was in process before, but how can we also harness really the energy that an emergency situation really, kind of lights a fire under a lot of things that maybe had been, not moving forward as quickly. So, one of those, and a question that came through, Faith, you've talked a little bit about some of the modernization that has happened with WIC and other programs. Do you see what other modernizations do you think are needed that would help more Iowans? And is this something that happens at the state level, at the federal level? What are you hoping to see more of in the future to keep kind of, getting better as we move along?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Aubrey. So I think, when we think about SNAP, right, it's a program that's been around for decades. It has nutrition assistance in the name, but I think we can all acknowledge it's not really built as a nutrition program. It's a food insecurity program, and that matters. But how do we inject the nutrition element into it? And that is something that takes those innovative pilot approaches. So look, for example, at double up food bucks. Go to a farmer's market or another vendor, buy fruits and veggies with your SNAP EBT card, and you get to double the amount you're able to put toward that. That is an innovation that came up and really bubbled up organically kind of throughout the nation. And so much so that it became a proof of concept to our federal partners at USDA, who are the administrators of the SNAP program. And they said, you know what? This is so good and worthwhile. We're going to make this an option for all programs to access. And so we really need to be able to do more things like that. Really take these pilots, incubate them, and then show that proof of concept to our federal partners who can make those changes and make those allowances at the federal level to really expand and make sure that SNAP is more than just handing over benefits. And again, there's a space for that, and that matters. And I think the other piece, in getting to who and where that change needs to occur, it's everywhere. It's at the federal level, it's at the state level, and it's down at the local government level, but also the community level. Certainly, I think government, state government in particular, rightfully so, has had a history, right, of thinking that we know what's best for people. And we will go ahead and make these changes because we think we know that. We can't keep doing that. We can't do that anymore. And that's not the model that we at Human Services or that public health want to take. It's engaging those like Monica, like Suli, who are doing that work at the community level, who understand the community needs, and saying to them, asking them what would help, what would be good. And then how can we translate that over at the state level to make it something that our federal partners can latch onto and understand why we have that particular need. And as others have said, we're never going to be able to fill 100% of the need with SNAP, but certainly I think we could agree that there's opportunities for programs like SNAP and WIC to fill more of the need and reach more people.
Definitely. I think, we always look at these programs as they all layer on top of each other. And if you pull one, all that does is cause cascading negative effects down for people who are struggling as it is, because no one, whether it's SNAP or, any of these programs, can do all of it alone. So, Zuli, you kind of brought up a great point regarding barriers to lack of assistance with, food programs and failing to meet the needs of communities. What kind of actions or things are, what kind of stories do you think we could be making, or changes could we be talking about to ensure that everyone in Iowa, regardless, of their status, age, gender, any of those things, are, getting served and getting access to services? Are there specific policies or changes you're asking or looking to make?
I think, like Faith said, it needs to come up from higher above, because I think it's kind of sad when we say it locally and we want to help others, but people are like, no, I'm not being told by, so-and-so. But I think if it comes from higher up above, it'll make a change where it does not matter if you have the documentation or not. It should not matter if you have a social security or not. At the end of the day, we're all human. We all need food. I need food to survive. You need food. You need water. So those are the things that I think we need to start. Definitely. It shouldn't matter how I look or what's going on out there. Obviously, having someone with different language or paperwork, at least, that's in Spanish or English or Karen or Vietnamese, it's all type of different languages. Maybe not have them available printed out, but you can print it. And if someone comes in, because mine is culturally specific for the Latino community, but I am starting to get several people in the Asian community. And so, they come in, and yes, I speak Spanish and English, but that does not make me any different. They need food. And so I just automatically kick in, and whatever I can get from them, their information. So I think it all becomes in you as a person. Do you really truly want to help? Is this really the place? But I think it needs to come up from higher above and from our hearts to say, it doesn't matter what identification this person has or a social or not. We need to be able to help them and make the changes in your own organization to try to change into the different languages.
Great. Well, and Christina, I think you're a great example of really taking ownership of how do we want to serve our community? What do we want? What do we want to have to eat, and how do we want to grow it? So, can you share, what have been some of those challenges and changes? I know there's been, things at the federal or the state level, obviously land access and how, we've been able to use it have, really been top of mind lately. So can you talk about, what are some of these policies or changes, whether they're barriers or, things that you've been able to move beyond that have helped you get to where you are today?
Yes. Okay. So like I said, the Meskwaki Food Sovereignty Initiative has grown over the past 10 years now, and it's definitely transformed. A lot of, as people are aware, Indigenous people have been dislocated from their own lands. A lot of times Indigenous people have to readjust to their land, their weather, the environment that they're in their new location. And people often think that Indigenous people have been, like, it's a past, it's history basically, and yet we're still dealing with the struggles that come along with it. And that, you can place them on, the rations that we received when we did the trees. You can do with the USDA, with the commodities program that had led to our high diabetes rate in our communities. My father, Arthur Blackcloud Jr., he had passed away at a young age in his late 40s. And who's in their 40s right now. And he passed away from diabetes, from health. And I want to say it's a lot with the commodities program, and seeing that how USDA is readjusting their programming into more farmers, farm to school program, or the food boxes and all that they have now available, and the resources behind growing more farmers. It takes a while and to transform a community, and it's taken us over hundreds of years to get to this point where we're at right now. And thankfully, to a lawsuit that has been, won, I guess, Keep Siegel versus Vilsack of the USDA, our tribal communities in the United States have access to funding for a longer term to be able to rebuild our communities, to rebuild our natural lifeways that we may have lessened over all these years and everything. So a lot of times we are, trying to become more independent. So I stress that all the time. And communities can become more independent with all the resources and funding behind them to grow the communities themselves. So more recently, I'm thankful for the Iowa State Extension Program, their Master Gardeners training. We're kicking off right now, going into it. I'm been accepted into it, so that way I can volunteer and grow my own expertise and knowledge in those areas of non-traditional foods of growing and everything. And what I hope that will lead to is that I'm able to teach more people, so that way they can be more into a farmer's market, growing their, their profiting or whatever, growing their own currency and everything like that, their income. So that way it goes back into the society. It's like a long-term thing. But I hope that the program that I'm involved in is going to lead to that. So that way we can grow our own farmers and everything, not only within the Meskwaki Indian settlement, but off the settlement and all the people that we'll come in contact with in Iowa. So I'm really excited for a lot of different things like that. I was grateful to see, like our Red Earth Gardens, our tribal organic farm, being able to provide food boxes to the community here through a HUD funding source. And that's providing fresh organic produce to our community here, as well as our health department partnering up with our Red Earth Gardens. So that way our diabetic programs will provide the food sources to assist and teach our people that have diabetes in our community to lessen the health disparity that we have here. So I'm just like, there's like so many, it's all interconnected. We have it at the federal government, working at the state government, we have our land, water that we have to worry about, federal government. And it's all connected. And to be able to have our community leadership here to be able to support these areas. So it's partnership, it's communication, it's getting out there and just, speaking what you have in your mind, even if it's a simple idea, you just get there and do that. So that way, providing a healthier earth, people I think is the bottom line to it altogether. Providing those services to assist those that are unable to, protecting our natural resources, being able to grow our income at farmers markets for the smaller farms, or getting our foods into our stores. At one time, our Redder's Gardens were in Hy-Vee, and that was great to see, just because it's the healthier option, the healthier access for our people. I can continue on and on and on, right?
I know we could have, have this discussion for the whole summit. And I think, really, you bring up some great, points. I think, like the USDA and some of the changes, I think we've all learned over the last, Linda talked about how the food that the food banks system used to provide, was very focused on shelf stable and, items that could, have longevity. But we've all learned that a diet rich in processed foods without access to protein, dairy, and vegetables just leads to further issues beyond food insecurity, with having health challenges and health barriers. So, I think it's a great example of how, sometimes we have responses to programs that are meant to help, that it isn't always seen that way from people in this space. And I think one example that has come up within this group was one of the responses to the pandemic was the USDA Farmers to Families Food Box Program. That was something that was started April of 2020 as a response to support farmers, also support those in need, and, really what brought a lot of food and resources to the area, but there were also benefits and challenges to that program. So could we have a discussion? I know, when we were practicing earlier, we've had both sides of, that was an amazing program. It helped us serve so many people. And we've also had there were some really big challenges and barriers that were brought up with that program. Does anyone want to talk about kind of some of those kinds of situations?
On behalf of Knock and Drop, the USDA boxes were amazing to us. It was the beginning of the best things that happened. We were able to start servicing anywhere. We started with 30 people a week. And then when the USDA boxes came, we started servicing 200 families a week. So that was amazing to us. We were getting, as you were stating, protein. We were getting everything that we needed in these boxes. And our community was very thankful for this. So on our side, on Knock and Drop, that was an amazing program. And I really wish that we could continue it, to continue helping the smaller organizations like myself that don't have the hundreds of thousands of dollars like everyone else. My budget is really small. And my money, I have to stretch it out so long that there's times that I'm wondering, how am I going to order this month? Am I just going to order the free stuff, or am I going to reach out to some people? Do I have to do a fundraiser? And I know that's part of having an organization, but just having a year and a half in, the USDA boxes would be amazing for us if we were to continue it.
And I'll just echo on that really quick, because we were in the same boat. We still don't really have access to the spending power of a food bank, or our dollars don't go as far because we just don't have that access. So being able to utilize those USDA boxes and put them in the community fridge, we were going through maybe 30 to 50 boxes a day where we were moving through the fridge. And to lose that resource was a hit. And certainly our budget is small too. And so it was a time of abundance that was really, really helpful for us.
I think the USDA food box program was a great program, and it was a good opportunity for USDA to understand the needs of our community and to be able to modify how they provide food for us as a food bank. And so, you know, with that change has come new opportunities for the USDA to provide food in that form. And so the shift that they've made with that are the boxes that they're now providing. It is a different network. I do have to say that having those boxes available for additional partners to be able to partake and distribute was a great way to get food out. But I will also say that in the new system of the boxes that they've shifted to over this summer, it's the same materials and they're still available. And so, you know, we want to work with your local food bank to get those boxes available into your organization as well. And so we can continue to share that food like we had been before.
And I think you bring up kind of a great point that I know wasn't something that I was necessarily familiar with when we started with, you know, the Farmers to Family program is a great example of, you know, so when that program ended, the $1 billion that were remaining were funneled into the Emergency Food Assistance Program, also known as TFAP, which has obviously been providing a ton of food and resources throughout the state for a long time. However, you know, for Eat Greater Des Moines and 80% of our partners, we're not able to access TFAP because we don't fit into the model that our food bank has decided to access. So, you know, how do we start to talk about, you know, what are some of those structural barriers to food access, and making sure that when there are, you know, billions of dollars being put into purchase and provide food, that we are able to get those resources out into the community without necessarily having gatekeepers that are sometimes slowing down that process.
You know, one thing that we see is that oftentimes those programs that are coming through the USDA do come with some guidelines attached to them. And so, I mean, I guess what I'll say is that for the USDA TFAP program, any partner agency can participate in that project if you're willing to follow the rules that come with the program. And so, you know, we work closely with our partner agencies. For some who maybe haven't done TFAP in the past, but they were interested, we work with them to help them say, okay, these are the guidelines. How can we follow these guidelines so that they can also distribute that food and make that food available to the people who visit their organizations? And so, yeah, sometimes there are some additional guidelines that come with that. Those are put in place to help protect everybody so that it's available for everyone. And those are some opportunities that we just need to figure out how to make things work so that we can continue to have that food available.
And I think from the other side, from being in a space where a lot of that is blocked from us, having organizations who are willing to kind of put in the groundwork and make decisions on an organizational level that, hey, we understand these rules, and yes, we follow these rules to continue accessing these resources, but we understand that other organizations or other community leaders have better access to the actual hungry people, right? And so we will work with them to be instead of maybe gatekeeping these resources, we will be a transfer point where we will pass on resources. We will make sure that we are following all the rules, but then we need to kind of let go of some of that control and let folks who are in the community doing the groundwork have those resources to distribute to get to that end point. I think that, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for that. I don't see it happening very much, but I think that there's just a lot of opportunity for that to happen and for people to kind of recognize that hoarding resources doesn't really help anyone.
That's a good, the hoarding, you know, is I don't think is something we see a whole lot. We want to make sure all organizations receive that food. But one, I think we talked about before is the concern of food safety, where in some instances, I think when there weren't protocols in place, I think that's what we had talked about, is that it's a great program, just making sure that rules are followed and protocols is that, that we had food sitting on a corner. Food safety is a big concern. We had someone calling the food banks asking us to take 2 or 3 loads, semi-loads of boxes, and they were giving them out to their parishioners, and they weren't people in need. So we've heard, we've received a lot of feedback in regards to that. So I think the perfect world, we do the best we can with the protocols, and food safety being number one, and also working with partners. And every community is different, and every partnership is different. I think the biggest thing is continue to communicate with those in your community, and continue to go, like Kim had talked about, is she continues to help all the partners. The food banks aren't here to we help our partners be better. We educate, we support. This past year, even, how can we get additional food to you? I think that's what we need to concentrate, is how do we support one another in areas. But I think that food safety and that comes up as a very key area. I don't know, Kim, do you want to add to anything to that?
Well, I think it's a point about, working together with the community partners. And I know, like Linda said, every community is different, and every kind of the saying is, you've seen one food pantry, you've seen one food bank, you've only seen one, because we're all different. And so, I think it's that kind of, like I mentioned earlier, about working with the community partners and building those relationships. And so that you have those positive relationships as you move forward. And as there are times of need, it's easier to kind of build on that and work together. And in some areas that's easier than in others. And I think it's important to acknowledge that as well. But I think, we've all had a lot of growth over this throughout the pandemic, and understanding kind of what's important and how we can meet those needs. And I think, just as an example, here at HACAP, we were able to receive a grant that helped us focus on culturally inclusive foods. And we were able to work with different groups of cultures within our neighborhood, and ask them questions about, what kind of foods are you looking for? What kind of things would you like to see in pantries that are not available? And now we have a new focus on being able to provide all different kinds of food for multiple cultures. We hadn't done that before, as in the conversation about how food banks maybe haven't pivoted in some ways. It's a very important factor for us, and it shows, as we all discussed, it shows an opportunity for us to grow and modify and see how we can meet the needs that are best for our community.
I think, Kim, you bring up a great point about access and bringing it to certain populations. When we talk about access specifically for older adults, we know they have a lot of unique needs. Transportation is an issue. I know sometimes technology has been a new thing that we've been able to connect people in need of food through technology. A lot of the people we work with, we don't have exact numbers, but we think those that we work with, only about 30% of older adults do have access to the internet or a mobile phone, and maybe they're not mobile. So when we're talking about hunger and food insecurity, it's really multifaceted. Someone who's food insecure and hungry, it's not just because they're lacking the amount of food. The big topics we've been discussing lately are the social determinants of health. So we know only 20% of someone's health is based off healthcare. And so when you're working with an individual who is food insecure and giving them food, maybe an older adult isn't able to prepare their own meals. Maybe they can't leave their home. So even though we're providing this food, it's still not accessible to them. So I think it goes beyond just working with other hunger fighting organizations and working with healthcare organizations, working with Medicaid, our local area agencies on aging provide services to meet the needs of all of those, whether it's homemaker services and coming into your home and providing home modification so that they can reach the fridge and it's safe for them to do that. And also transportation, bringing them to the doctor's appointments, medication. A lot of our older adults have that hard choice of choosing between paying for their very pricey medications and paying for food. So if we can help them in those ways and help them balance their medications and their healthcare issues with food, then that's really how we're going to look at making hunger and food insecurity reduced and more accessible.
And Alex, I'm really glad you brought up social determinants of health, because that's something that I've been thinking about too, right? While you wait for these kind of slow wheels of regulatory change at the federal level to occur, which unfortunately don't move as fast as we would want, remembering that we have these other levers we can be pulling on. So mentioning Medicaid, when we really want to be able to move toward Medicaid looking at not just helping with the delivery and payment of acute healthcare services, that's a need, but how do you look at the whole person, as Alex was referring to, right? And if someone is food insecure, they're not going to be as healthy as they could be. If someone lives in an unsafe neighborhood where they're not able to go out safely to access food, that's a problem as well. So using a tool like Medicaid to really look at, if I want to improve the health of this individual or this family, these are the variety of things I need to help connect them to as resources if we really want to be able to see that change. And even non-traditional spaces, like even the child welfare space, for families who enter the child welfare system solely because they have a charge of neglect, because they can't provide the food that their baby needs because they can't access it. We don't ever want that family to be entering the child welfare system for that reason. That is an entirely preventable reason. So then what are the other spaces we can help catch that family and make sure that that baby, those children, have access to the nutrition that they need so that they're not ever encountering our system?
Faith and Alexandra, I totally agree with you guys. I just want to share really quick. Aubrey and Monica know this. I use my space. We partnered up with Hy-Vee Pharmaceutical, and we went ahead and did COVID shots. So we did a 2-for-1. That was part of, making changes, is using your space and using what you have to reach out to these people. This is where they felt safe. They were getting food, and at the same time, we were offering the COVID shot. We were able to vaccinate almost 900 people. So that is huge. And this is one thing that I think all of us can do, like Faith was just saying, if we all come together and make the appropriate changes at the appropriate levels. And at the end of the day, we have to think that we're human. And as much as your child needs to eat, my child needs to eat, everybody's child needs to eat. So if we can just use our own spots to be able to make changes, partner with others, and maybe, for example, Knock and Drop. Maybe Knock and Drop is not doing how Food Bank of Iowa wants it. Let's partner up. Let's talk about it. Let's say, you know what? We have this, but this is what we need from you. Let's teach each other what we need to make the changes. Because when you're holding on to something, not that I'm saying you are, but when you're holding on to something and I'm not wanting to learn, this is where we clash and we don't make changes. We're not helping our community because I'm not willing to listen and you're not willing to teach me. So the best thing we can do is if we can come together as one and make the change, I think we would make better things. Go, Aubrey. Sorry.
I was also going to say that's exactly right. We call the food as a flag of a lot of things happening, like Alexandra had talked and you had mentioned, but it's a flag of a variety of things happening within a household. But utilizing that for wraparound services and getting them help in additional areas. And one thing I think we know SNAP is something that does work, and it does fill a portion of the gap of feeding the hungry. But the SNAP hotline this past year, the number of phone calls that the Iowa Food Bank Association SNAP hotline received is, double-digit increases, and the calls that we're getting is 1,000 calls. It's just so. I think you're exactly right. Is that wraparound services is a key area for all of us to help take that step out of poverty, out of food insecurity. So.
Well, and, like you mentioned, food is the flag that kind of, is really one of the first pieces to go if you're struggling with, having to pay for rent and your healthcare and transportation. So, I know that was kind of like what Monica or, Zuli have mentioned is, part of this, because food safety, I think, is everyone's. Nobody wants anyone to get sick in the process of serving them. So I know, something that we've been doing is purchasing refrigerators and freezers and shelving and equipment so that all of these partners, whether they're a daycare that just needs, another fridge so they can store more food and send it home with families, or a library, that they can serve food, so really, looking at these places that have the relationships and that are the trusted partner, instead of assuming, making sure that they do know food safety training and that they have the equipment necessary. So, I think, those are some of the opportunities that we have to not only, expand that network, but also make sure that they are set up for success with having, the DNR has had their equipment grant that, that was a big thing that we were able to do, was to get the grant and then pay for equipment for other organizations. So, are there things like that that you're seeing, what are some of these gaps that, whether it's, organizations that have access to funding or individuals that we could be working to fill so that we can expand food access?
I think it's important to work with our community partners and our social service agencies. So, we've been talking about the social determinants of health that fits in with community action agencies, energy assistance programs. We've talked about WIC and SNAP, but it's really kind of bringing all of those people together to be able to make sure that a family has resources to meet whatever need they have. And it's really like working with the families directly, understanding what a family needs, and the folks in the community that can connect them to what they need individually. And that we have a program that we're trying to build here at HACAP. I call it More Than Food, but it's just because that's what it's really about, is families need more than food, and how can we connect them with those resources. I actually have a social work intern that's with me this semester, so we can kind of build this program into something that we can roll out to all of our partners and be able to offer a set of community resources to our partner agency food pantries and meal sites to be able to connect families with whatever needs those are, because we know that families have needs that are so far beyond just the food that we can. That food is the easy one. And, as we kick off Hunger Action Month this September 1st, and that's our the goal this year, the motto is food shouldn't be an impossible choice. And so people shouldn't have to make decisions about putting food on their table or paying their medical bill or paying their energy bill. And so being able to wrap those services around a family and really help them, just be successful and provide those resources. So I think we can all agree that that's something important to everybody.
I agree. Well, and, our time has flown by. So we're actually just getting to the end of our panel. So I want to give everyone a chance, if you could just take 30 to 45 seconds and say, how do we empower, some of these new systems that have come out of, or changes that were made because of COVID, or empower new organizations that have started to thrive and exist and, continue to do good work. So what are you seeing? What's your focus for this next year to make sure some of those positive changes that we've seen, as well as some of the challenges that have come up, what is your focus for this next year to do that. And we can start off with Christina.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I'm really, grateful for our discussion, our talk here on this panel. But I think my focus for the next several years is actually to work with families directly on the ground, so that way we can grow their skills, and either it's growing their food, hunting, foraging, fishing, all those kind of great things, so that way they can feed themselves, become more independent. And I think that's a large focus of what I'll be doing the next couple of years. But also to grow our small family farmers is a good area to, find support in systems, create the systems for them to be more included within the school, within everything. So
that's great. Faith, how about you?
Yeah, so we are undertaking, as folks maybe have heard about, a project that we're calling Alignment between the Department of Public Health and the Department of Human Services, which is really about how do we better leverage and bring our programs together so that to the ultimate benefit of the folks who live in Iowa and who receive our services. And so really breaking down those silos, which I think goes hand in hand with if we want to look at the whole person and that holistic care, ensuring that we aren't operating in these siloed boxes and not speaking to each other. Because if we can really leverage the different resources that exist across the system, then we're able to maximize how we serve people and the benefits that they receive.
That's great. How about you, Linda?
I think it's important. I really want to focus to ensure Iowans have access to nutritious food. That's number one. And we are working to make sure that the supply of food is there, and doing it by partnering with one another in our communities. And every community is unique, and that's where it begins. So
great. And Zuli, can you share kind of what your plans are?
Well, I'm working on a farmers market where we will help small businesses, farmers to sell, and then the funds will come to the organization. And I actually want to sit down with Monica because I have a lot that we can actually plant some stuff. So I'm looking forward to that. It's new things. I will.
Yes. All right. Kim, how about you?
We're really focused on increasing the amount of nutrition. I think as a food bank, we've done really well at feeding people, but we want to feed people better. And so really focusing on how we can set up contracts with local growers to be able to buy local and have fresh produce available all summer long. That's grown right here in Eastern Iowa is something we're really committed to. And, just looking at how we can meet people where they're at and continue to help everyone be successful.
Great. Thank you. How about Alex? What do you see in the future?
Yeah, so with congregate meal sites opening, reopening, closing, we'll be working on a lot of those innovative practices that I talked about, the Encore cafes and the Iowa cafes, and just expanding those across the state and working with our area agencies on aging to evaluate. We're in a point of large change right now. What's going to be the best way to move forward so that there are no gaps? Every county will have a meal site or a home delivered meal option, and working to make that closed loop system, hopefully with healthcare systems as well.
Great. Well, and we'll finish up with Monica. I know you've got a lot on your plate for the next year. What are you, where do you see things going, and what are you hoping to accomplish?
Sure. Well, in addition to running a small urban farm, so I'm also a local grower and producer, I think ultimately continuing to build a framework so that we have a toolkit and a toolbox for communities and neighborhoods who want to make accessible, nutrient-dense food available, while still following stringent safety protocols. We're using technology in that way. We're installing Raspberry Pis on the back of community fridges, so we have constant temperature and humidity monitoring, so that it is absolutely safe. But I think also just empowering people in communities to understand that these things are possible, and they're possible through collaboration and through finding people who are willing to distribute resources more equitably, because people are out there who are willing to do those things. So yeah, I think just building up from the foundations we've started and continuing to grow partnerships and finding new partnerships, similar to what everyone on the panel has kind of said.
Great. Well, we are, I might have been wrong that this gets over at 11. So great news. We've still got time. So that's great, because we did have some questions really that we haven't had a chance to get to yet. We've talked about older adults and the needs, the challenges there. How about children, and how, with schools when they were shutting down, what are some of the key issues, whether it's schools or those that are feeding children, that you see are facing to make sure that our kids are fed?
There is a program today, a little breakout session on childhood hunger. So I do encourage people to step in on that. But I know there's a variety of different programs, Operation Backpack that we've been, with the WIC program. I'd love to hear more about how we can expand the WIC program, summer meals, the daycare, food, all those types of things. So there's a variety of projects, and our Department of Education has been exceptional during the pandemic in pivoting, again, that word, but they have so many waivers and so much work that they have done to make sure that kids receive the food if they weren't able to attend school this past year. In fact, I don't understand all the waivers that they had to go by, but I know that we're constantly reviewing things, and we are very fortunate in Iowa.
I think one thing that I wish was talked about more when it comes to childhood hunger is direct resources to families. I think that sometimes, instead of these incredibly large sums of money going to organizations or going to, frankly, nonprofits, it could be better spent directly to families. Families know what they need. Parents know what they need. And so, that's above my pay grade, certainly, to make those decisions. But I think that it's a valid conversation to talk about directly supporting families with monetary resources or increased SNAP benefits.
That's a great place that we've been able to, Congress passed and we've implemented what's fondly termed pandemic EBT, which is really targeted at those children and families directly who either, were not able to attend school in person and therefore did not have access to that free and reduced price breakfast and lunch that they would normally receive. That's two very important meals of the day. And we have seen enormous success. It's been a very bumpy road. It's difficult when you get a directive from the federal government that doesn't really include, and here's how you will do this. So we partnered very quickly with Department of Education to figure that out. And I think pandemic EBT really has been a success. And then Congress expanded it even further to look at children under 6 as well, so that we were capturing those who are not yet in school. And that, I think, because, like Monica talked about, that was a direct benefit to programs. We mailed out those EBT cards. They get to use them in the way that works for them.
Julie, did you have something to add?
I was just going to say that we work a lot with the school liaisons to be able to provide food because not all the families got the EBT cards, I'm sorry. But, that's what we need to talk about. Those are the changes that need to come because not every single family, not every single child was able to be provided an EBT card. And at the end of the day, it's a human being that's going out without food. So sometimes we do need these smaller organizations because that's where people feel comfortable coming to getting food and not feeling discriminated. Not that I'm saying that any of you would discriminate. I'm just saying they feel threatened. They look at you and you're not one of me. I don't speak your language. I don't know if I'm going to feel comfortable. I don't know if you're going to look down upon me. So those are the things that we need to look at as a bigger picture, is working with the smaller organizations that are actually in the root of the community and making the necessary changes so people can feel comfortable and Iowa can become a welcoming Iowa.
When you bring up a great, I think the pandemic EBT is a great example of, working with schools and that established system, but you also bring up a really good point of kids that aren't school age, and I think that's something we've really seen more of recently, especially as we're doing, food recovery of larger wholesale items. Is daycares have been, really a place that I think there's a huge opportunity for us to provide more resources. Part of the USDA Farmers to Family Food Boxes, we had quite a few daycares who were so grateful to have access to those, the fresh milk and the protein and the dairy. And that's been a large gap now, that they don't have the access, and we're trying to fill it with, food recovery. But, do any of you have thoughts or ideas on how we can, I think schools have definitely been one way, pandemic EBT, but what are some of these other opportunities where we could, really be kind of extending to make sure that we are capturing, getting food to all the potential places where people are?
I don't want to monopolize, but happy to jump in. This is a place, for us as the state where, again, I would reinforce that it's so important, so very important for us to intentionally create and maintain space for the voices of people we serve and the voices of those who are at the community level who better understand what a specific community may need and where those spaces are that people are at so that we can help meet them there. I don't think I can underscore that quite enough of how very important that is to be able to address those kinds of gaps.
Agreed. Well, and so for serious this time, like we're really going to be wrapping up for real this time. So, what, part of some of the changes that happened with COVID was part of it was reducing the ability for people to choose because, I think the food boxes were, it was pre-packed, here's what you get. And we've had quite a few pantries who had moved to choice pantries that had to unfortunately step back from that. So how do you see choice being, do you see that coming back? What kind of additional choices, how are you all hoping to make sure that families get to choose, what kind of food they want to serve their family?
I think I'll just speak overall is I think the choice is our preference, of course. You're probably right now, we're in we never thought we'd be here, but we're still at this precarious point of, what's happening. So you're starting to see hybrids. But, that choice is important. We don't want people just to take food and not eat it. We want them to have food and eat it. Food that they want. It is a choice and it's very personal. So I think that's, Kim, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think it's most respectful to any human to let them choose what they want to eat in foods that they're comfortable and most happy eating, right? Like we need to nourish our bodies, but food also brings us joy. And so in order to, that means that we as a food bank or a food pantry, wherever you are, need to have a wide variety of foods available. And that can be hard. And especially in this time of pandemic, being able to let people make those choices. But so I know that I'm first to say, I can't wait till we can get back to letting people choose. I know we have a lot of partners that are doing shopping lists and letting people choose. And then there's volunteers that put the food together and box it up so that people do have options. So I'm hoping that we can all continue to offer more of those choice options for families. That's most respectful for everybody.
And I think too, really trying to continue to center and then put resources behind what we're hearing from our communities, right? Because the community that's utilizing the community fridge is different from the community that Alexandra serves, is different from the community that Christina serves, is different than Zuli's community. So really centering those voices and those needs in our programs, in our work, I think is paramount.
Definitely, I definitely agree with that. We need to You know, it's not just about us sitting up here and saying, I've got an organization, for example, my organization. I always go back and talk to the community and find out what they're looking for, what they're needing. And if I can make it where it's a choice that they can have, I will definitely work on that. We were recently, we're going to be in the Food Bank of Iowa magazine, whatever. They were there to interview us. And, you know, it was really amazing. A guy said, we've been to 3 or 4 food pantries today, but yours is very happy. People are happy. People know you at a personal level. They're saying hi to you. And that's what it's about. It shouldn't be about a handout. It should be about being friends, about being there for you, being there for your neighbor. And I think that is huge. And it's not just about your neighbor or your community, but us as an organization coming together as friends, as, you know, someone that can help another. If I can help Monica or Christina or Aubrey can help me or Linda can help me, let's join forces. Let's all come together, because if we come together, we can definitely make changes, and we can make the appropriate changes for our community that we each serve, because we all serve different people.
Well, I think that is a great final thought, and really, you know, kind of bringing it back together, that none of this is done by any one entity. And it's important to really trust those in the community to really work and know what's best, and, you know, provide the support where we can, because that's really, it's the people in the communities serving their neighbors, reaching out and making sure that they have the support and resources that they need, that all of this comes together. So it takes, you know, really having these programs that are large, you know, like the Iowa Department of Aging and Human Services and Food Bank Association. They're incredibly important, but it's also, that can't be done without some of these organizations in the communities stepping up, stepping in, and doing the work to really meet the needs of everyone there. So I want to say thank you to all of our amazing panelists. I know I've learned some new things, which, being in this role for a long time, I think that's my favorite thing, is to learn something new from other amazing people in this space. So thank you for taking the time to share what you know today. And I think Keegan or Kyle or someone's going to be jumping in to transition to the next panel.
Thank you very much. That panel was just so inspiring. Also the different views, the interplays, just the spread across our state, the different types of organizations, all pledging to work together, all with such positive stories. And so I just wanted to thank Aubrey and the whole panel. Excellent work.